All right, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to episode 121 of the Hideout, where we will be discussing all things Web3 gaming and the Metaverse, and probably a whole lot more with this awesome panel that we have for today. We're going to be starting with some introductions. So I will, sorry, I'm getting some background noise here, so let me just make sure that I'm not. All right, there we go. Um, we're going to be starting with some introductions where everyone is going to tell us about what they are building, and we'll learn a little bit more about the projects, starting with myself. My name is Nick Frontera. I am one of the founders and the CEO of Apollo Entertainment, the company behind Satoshiverse, the Legion's 2029 game, and the Hideout. We've been building in the space. Gosh, I entered the space back in 2017. I was a lawyer in the entertainment industry before that, and started building Satoshiverse back in 2020 as a collaboration with the infamous Jose Delbo, who was a 60-year Marvel and DC comic artist who we partnered with to create the story of Satoshi the Creator, a lore based on Satoshi coming back as a superhero to fight the defenders of fiat, and that is what our game Legions 2029 is based off of. I'm not going to go too deep into details because I've pinned a tweet at the top of the spaces with all the information you need to get involved with the game if you haven't heard of it. But in a very short summary, it is a fast-paced hack and slash roguelike hybrid that is fully blockchain enabled and completely free to play. We're doing a ton of contests. There's ways to earn NFTs in game. And we are going to be having a major announcement coming in the next 2 weeks of something we've been working on for a really long time. So I'm really excited about that. It's a great time to enter the community. I know, some of the regulars here are going to get a little alpha in this post, and then we'll be definitely talking more. But we have some very exciting things we've been working on for these next couple months that are going to fundamentally change a lot of things about the game. So we're excited about that. And now is a great time to hop in. So yeah, without further ado, I'd love for our panelists to introduce themselves, tell us about what you're building. Feel free, if you've got graphics or anything visual, to pin it to the top of the spaces. We'd love to see that. And yeah, so why don't we start with our friends at Super B. Welcome to the spaces. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hello, thanks for having me. I'm CEO of Superbeat, Jun Young, and I'd just like to say this is a great X Spaces. I didn't know this many people would be joining, so I'm really excited to talk a little bit more about what kind of experience we're providing. We're at the core of our gameplay is a social experience, and we've envisioned ourselves as a social platform, like a gaming theme park, a place where players can kind of immerse themselves in high quality games with multiple genres ranging from kind of casual to mid-core to some rather hardcore competitive gameplay. So more than just a collection of games, we kind of are aiming to become a dynamic playground where a lot of users can interact, meet friends, and at the end of the day, of course, we are positioned as a Web3 game, and I'll touch more on this later, but we don't want to drive the entire attention to the Web3 elements. We don't want to be tech leading. We want to start leading with the experience. So instead of marketing ourselves as a Web3 game, we like to kind of offer the high quality, fun social gaming experience first and have the, rewards and, NFTs integrated in a very natural, not overly technical way. So yeah, that's where kind of, the intro is, but yeah, thanks for having me and I'm excited to talk more.
I love it. And we do these spaces a lot, and we hear from different founders. And I know our experience has been that when all this was new in 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, it made sense to lead with the tech because the tech was really all there was in these games at that point. And now we've gotten to a point where there's such great games, such great experiences that I think the trend and really the right way to go is starting to back end all of this stuff. And not necessarily, I think some people say abstract it away completely, hide it completely. I do think it's still important to focus on, the value proposition of Web3, where we are actually creating value by integrating the tech But I totally agree. It's about leading with the experience, which sometimes is amplified by the tech and making the tech secondary. So really great to have you on the space. Looking forward to diving in further. Let's jump over to our friends at the Lost Glitches. Welcome.
Hey everyone, my name is Nia. I'm the community manager at the Lost Glitches. I'm pleased to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation to join your space today. So the Lost Glitches, we're a next-gen trading card game built on Arbitrum's Xi blockchain, and we're blending classic TCG gameplay with RPG mechanics and on-chain ownership. We recently just launched on Steam 2 weeks ago, and you can add us to your library, to your game library. We're free to play. It's been a super exciting time ever since. I've been in the Web3 space for a while now, and with the Lost Glitches since the very beginning, about 3 years ago, combining my background in gaming, community building, hospitality management, storytelling, to help bridge the gap between traditional gamers and Web3. And so right now, since we just launched on Steam, we're growing a vibrant player base. It's super exciting. We're designing community events, giveaways, and we're making sure that our players not just play the game, but that they feel something when they do, because we think it's important, to provide a lot of fun, creativity, thrill, a sense of belonging. And yeah, that's basically our community and our game in a nutshell. Thank you so much for having us. Yeah.
I love it. And, I know that Steam doesn't necessarily make it easy for Web3 games to launch there. And there's a lot of design decisions that go into, how to effectively keep a Web3 pipeline, but also use Steam as a distribution channel, and something that we have been looking deeply into, which a little bit more alpha that we're dropping in this space. So congratulations on finding a way to make it work. I know it's been a challenge, to do so, but I think eventually Steam may let up their regulations a little bit. But it's awesome to see Web3 games using traditional distribution channels and finding ways to make that pipeline work, because I think ultimately that's what we need. So definitely would love to dive in and learn more about your experience there as we go into the questions. All right, let's jump over to Roy from DAOs.fun. Tell us a little bit about what you guys are building.
Yo, GM guys. The Dallas Fun account is down in the audience, so if you haven't checked it out, it's down there. But yeah, I'm Roy. I do BD among other things for Dallas Fun. We basically allow people to start their own hedge funds. And the thesis behind this is that meme coin traders are literally outperforming some of the best hedge funds and investment firms on Wall Street or in the world. And so, we believe that crypto and this thing that we do every day is the future of finance. And so, the logical progression of this is that the best meme coin traders in the world are going to have hedge funds. Because, I'd much rather get exposure to someone that's better at trading than me, than just lose my money. So, that's kind of what we enable. And so, free to answer any questions about it. But no, shout out to you guys, because like the gaming and metaverse, sector, I guess, of crypto is probably one of the most difficult things to, build in. So hats off to you guys. You guys do not have, the easiest road. So shout out to you guys for, continuing to build, in the space. Oh, and thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. Thanks for the, invite.
Oh, I love it. And I love that you guys are decentralizing the crypto casino. We get to talk about meme coin trading and, the skill element of it. It starts to remind me if we could, bet on poker players, and, some of it's luck, some of it's strategy, some of it's, what you hear from a little bird who jumps into your Twitter feed. But like you said, I'd rather be betting on a trader who knows what they're doing and has experience than trying to figure it out myself. So really cool what you guys are doing, and definitely excited to dive in more. Let's jump over to Spencer, who will take us away with the questions, and we can get started.
What is going on, everyone? My name is Spencer. I am the business development manager here with Satoshiverse and Apollo Entertainment. Excited to be here, and like Nick said, I will be asking the questions and moving the space forward today. So just want to do some quick housekeeping items here before we actually get into the questions. So first thing I just did, I pinned a tweet to the top of the space that says we're live. So for everyone listening, we do a giveaway every week on the Hideout. Today we are giving away 5 Satoshi's crystals, which is one of the main in-game resources within our game Legions 2029. Very important resource that allows you to upgrade all of your in-game items like your skins and your weapons. So something you definitely want to have in your account. All you have to do in order to win that prize is just stick around until the end of the space when we choose a winner. So if you're here listening now, don't go anywhere. Moving on next, kind of to the format of the space. Oh, and I guess something else I'll throw out there, if any of the speakers have anything representative or visual that they want to throw up and pin to the top of the space, videos or images just to show what you guys are working on, feel free to pin that. That's always good, just to help people be able to visualize what you guys are doing. So the format of the space today, we're going to start out with a group discussion question. And then get into some individual questions after that. And then if we have some time at the end, we'll do some more group questions. But for the group question, I will call on someone to start, and then feel free to just jump into the conversation from there. No need to raise hands or anything like that. And for the first question, without further ado, let's go to Super B for this one. So, in what ways do you think NFTs and true ownership of digital assets will most significantly impact society in the next 2 to 3 years?
I can go first. If no one else is going to jump.
Go for it.
Yeah, my thoughts are a little bit less like, I don't want to, sound like a jerk, but a little less head in the clouds than you might expect. My thoughts on this is that, like, NFTs, crypto in general, like, is facilitating the largest transfer of wealth in history. And so, honestly, I think the biggest impact on society over the next 2 to 3 years is what we're already kind of seeing, and people that are involved are going to continue to amass wealth, and people that aren't are going to continue to hold like dollars and fiat money that goes down in value. So, I think there's a lot of like use cases for NFTs and tokens in general that are cool, but honestly, I think the biggest impact is just going to be wealth transfer, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting, right? Because we kind of start to look at the core thesis behind, a lot of what blockchain started as when you look at Bitcoin and kind of this idea of wealth transfer and this idea that, we would move away from fiat currencies, and then kind of all of Bitcoin's forks that address different issues with it, but we're still targeted at that same goal. And I think what we've ultimately done in the blockchain space is kind of fragmented into two sections, right? There's kind of the DeFi space, and then there's kind of everything else, right? Because when you start to think about all the other sides, they all relate, I think, to this financialization of products, and really the way I see it, it's funny, as a former lawyer, when I start to think about these things, and people talk about, meme coins as securities and all this stuff, the Howey test, all these different things, I start to really think, well, I mean, in reality, the vast majority of these coins and NFTs and all those do really do behave and serve similar functions as traditional securities do. They're just offered at the retail level and packaged very differently. But they help, project owners fund projects. They create incentive alignment with communities. They allow communities to participate in the success of a company or a group. So there's a lot of like the benefits, the reasons we use things like stocks, the reasons we use different financial instruments to drive corporations. A lot of that is present, I think, with crypto. And so I think when we talk about wealth transfer, I think it's really the first time in a long time that retail investors have the ability to directly participate in the growth of very small companies. And I think to that part, in that point, I really do agree that this is facilitating this never before seen, access to this broader financial, decentralized ecosystem that allows you to directly participate. I do think that, and maybe this is, just my opinion, but I do think we're going to start to move away from some of the metas like meme coins, like, just kind of what we saw in the ICO boom, right? Where everybody had a thing, all the low quality stuff kind of shook itself out. And what we were left with was just like the really strong, projects. And I think in order for that wealth transfer to happen, and for this to be sustainable over the next 2 or 3 years, we are going to see a major consolidation from, all these wonderful ideas to a very core set of, use cases for the technology, for the cryptocurrencies and those types of things. And I think ultimately that means that a lot of these companies and communities are going to disappear, right? Because they're experiments. And in order for us to progress, I think we need to experiment. Now, I think from kind of going to the question, because the question really hits home for the reasons I got involved in the space. I genuinely believe that I thought it would happen sooner, honestly, but we still see it happening, that we are progressing towards a digital future. Digital is just becoming part of our daily lives. We're on our phones. We're going to have AR. We're going to have VR. We have gaming. And what NFTs and blockchain do is they create this ownership layer, this tangibilization layer for these digital assets that otherwise doesn't really exist, in a decentralized way. That tangibility layer, the ability to start having property rights over digital assets, is, to me, the be all and end all of what an NFT is, right? However you package it, however it looks, whether it's art, game assets, the title to a car, whatever, physical representations of, digital representations of physical collectibles that are bound together, whatever it is. At the end of the day, I think as our lives become more digital, we're going to want to own our digital assets in a way that's more familiar and a way that is similar to the way we own our physical assets. And that becomes possible because of NFTs and kind of the regulatory schemes that can be developed around them. I think there's going to be some friction there, but I think that's ultimately where this all goes. Go ahead, Super B. I saw you turn off.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to jump in and kind of further what you were saying, especially because one of our core mottos we have is, of course, digital ownership, and it speaks a lot to our point as well. And we at SuperB believe that digital ownership is more than just a technical concept. It really is a new paradigm that kind of redefines the relationship between users and platforms, I would say. And of course, in the traditional Web2 environment, I feel like the ownership of UGC, like user-generated content and assets, often reside within the platform, whereas Web3 obviously enables all the users to really own and control their in-game assets. And of course, I come from a very deep gaming background, and a lot of my close friends play the readily available Web2 games. And when I asked them, did they truly care about whether they own some of these in-game assets, yada yada, I feel like the majority say no until they find something that's incredibly rare loot, something that's tied to their account that they may have to, let's say, if they get an offer on, they may need to just sell the entire account to someone else to get like a fair, market value for. So I think that's something that a lot of us kind of have experienced in the past if you're a gamer, where, you can really spend a lot of time farming certain items or really getting good at a certain aspect, upgrading your, loot and character. But you can't really capitalize, once you, let's say, want to just sell certain items. A lot of these games don't necessarily have a marketplace set up for that, and you're going to end up having to lose full ownership of the entire account. Whereas, in a lot of Web3 settings, you can actually, generate revenue from upgrading your character, and without having to sell the entire account, you can sell specific items, right? So I kind of went off on a tangent there, but at SuperB, of course, we're trying to bring this concept of true ownership to life by turning all of our in-game assets, such as in-game items, my home and land, and some of our AI agents into NFTs. So of course, we'll probably talk more about some of the negative misconceptions with NFTs and how a lot of the, I guess, gamers that are more used to the Web2 environment may see NFTs. But at the end of the day, I do think there will be an inflection point where people do see that if some of the Web3 elements are integrated in a very natural way and it's not kind of in your face, down your throat, they'll realize a lot of the value that it provides and they won't just, run away from a game just because it's Web3. They'll actually take time to look at the trailer, maybe, hop on for 5 minutes and really try the game out. So yeah, I really do think in the next 2 to 3 years, this structure will become kind of the cornerstone of the creator economy, and users will not just, own their assets, but actually start to create and earn off of this active participation in new forms of economic activity.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I think that, when we're talking about the value proposition of Web3, and call me naive, but in 2017, when I joined up and was an avid gamer, I thought, this is going to be an easy sell. This is going to be like, this is for the people, by the people, type of thing. And it ended up being anything but that. And I think that that's in large part because of the narratives that we kind of fostered as an industry, because of some of the extremely rapid growth of the industry, and just things that were, I think, a little bit outside of any individual builder's control, but certainly affected everyone. I think narratives formed around Web3 gaming that probably painted it in a much worse light than the technology deserves. I think part of that was also just that the technology was very new and got released probably way ahead of time to the mainstream. It probably should have stayed a lot smaller than we tried to make it. But, we saw the first early implementations of Web3 happen in a way that didn't exactly excite gamers. And I think that we have some work to do to change that narrative. But, I think one of the things, this question comes up a lot, or this topic comes up a lot, and I think where I tend to land here is that it's all good, and great that we're creating this technology for consumers. And I think that is so important because ultimately the consumers drive the purchasing decisions. But because of how disruptive this technology is to existing business models, and that major studios are going to be needed to be building games that for mass adoption to occur, I really do think we also need to focus on building sustainable business models around Web3. I don't think that this can be something that is purely consumer driven. I think there has to be a defensible narrative for the Blizzards, the Ubisofts, the Activisions of the world to go and say, hey, maybe not with our top title, but in one of our titles, we want to back end some Web3 tech, and we want to test out this new business model because we believe it can expand the overall pot, right? Because at the end of the day, Web3 and this whole play to earn concept and the value redistribution involves creating additional value. And if there's no additional value being created, then it's just a disruptive technology that doesn't actually, it can't be sustained because we need value to redistribute. But I think that, as we can create these defensible business models, then we're able to convince major studios to adopt this technology. And I think that's where rubber really meets the road on these things. So yeah, anyways, I'd love to hear from you, Lost Glitches. What do you guys think?
Yeah, so it's definitely an interesting shift that's going on with Web3 technology and everything that it provides in terms of ownership. So we're giving players agency, and some of the items that they're getting in the game, they're permanently staying with them, and it's their choice what to do with them. And I think it's just a very, very exciting time that we're in right now, seeing all of that coming together. And it's also just super, super exciting to see, smaller projects, smaller games withstanding the test of time, because it's been a tough roller coaster ride over the last 3 years or so, up and downs with the market. And I think we're in an interesting time, and we're exploring this technology, and we're definitely on the forefront when it comes to enabling gamers to enjoy games in wholly new ways, and ways that benefit them rather than the big studios. So yeah, for me it's super, super exciting, because ever since I started my gaming journey, I remember I played a lot of Diablo 2 and I was collecting items, and you get these unique items and you're thinking, oh my God, how great would it be if I could somehow benefit from them? And you had all these people selling their items on eBay and whatnot, and it wasn't exactly legal. It was actually strictly against the terms of Blizzard. And I think it's just super, super, super exciting to be part of something that's giving the players agency over their time spent in the game, and to have that choice to do with your items as you wish.
Yeah, I think that's totally right. And I also kind of came from a childhood of Diablo 2 play, and that was what got me really interested in RPGs and player economies and all that. And it's funny because I think that's sometimes when we start to think about Web3 gaming and what it can be. I think sometimes we overestimate where the value lies. So you look at what happened with Diablo 3 and the real money auction house, and I was a huge fan of that. I thought that was super cool as someone who really loved to focus on the player economy and kind of wasn't the type to grind. I hated those repetitive game loops where you had to, play a boss 25 times just to maybe get an item that you needed. I much rather, get in those games and flip items and try to get the second SOJ by trading rather than finding it. But I think what that led to was when the real money auction house came out and I had, a job and could pick up, a couple of these really cool items for, $4 or $5. That was a bonus for me. I liked that. But there were a lot of people, who enjoyed the grind and really loved that aspect of, okay, I'm going to kill this boss 45 times. And then, that one time, that it drops that really good item, they were kind of chasing that endorphin rush. And that's a big chunk of gamers that play RPGs. And so I think, it's interesting because a lot of times I hear people say, oh, if World of Warcraft just enabled Web3 in their game economy, it would be such a better game. And I'm not 100% sure I agree with that. I think developing a Web3 game or any game that involves real money options is a challenge in and of itself. And that's something that has to be carefully designed for and really thought about as the game is being designed. And so, yeah, I think, our game was definitely very influenced by games like Diablo, but we had to make heavy modifications in order for real money, dynamics to exist without breaking the game loop. So yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with what you're saying, and I think that that's the inspiration for a lot of us. But ultimately, we're being forced to consider a lot of things that maybe those studios didn't have to consider back in the day because there wasn't necessarily an easy option for buying that sword for $5. Because I wasn't going on the forums and trading accounts and doing all the illegal stuff, or not illegal, but the stuff that broke the terms of service. I was just playing the game and grinding and trading, and that was fun for me. But then again, some people were, and facilitating that in a more seamless way definitely does help certain games. I do want to make one more point, and then we could actually move on unless others have thoughts. I think that this was touched on briefly, but I think maybe one of the places that Web3 is going to have the most sustainable implementations. Actually, I think RPGs might be the hardest genre, even though we talk about it. I think where we really are going to see Web3 have great applications is in UGC, right? In player generated content, facilitating peer-to-peer exchanges, really opening up the marketplaces so that gaming companies don't kind of become this central point of failure. I think we're seeing already kind of brand deals and things where interoperability between games is happening. I think we're going to go further in that direction. I think at some point Gucci will produce a hat that's a digital hat that you can wear in 6 different games, and to do that, Web3 really allows that to be a thing that we can confirm ownership on different platforms. And so this kind of UGC and interoperability layer, even outside of a single gaming context, I think we're going to see a lot more of. And I think that's really going to lead to, new use cases and new economies and new value that games may not have considered before. I think what we could end up seeing is standards. Like, what if, for example, I don't know that this would work for every game, but what if, for example, I could create an avatar as an individual content creator, and then that avatar could be used across PlayStation games, right? And on the console. And the way they're confirming that is through, some check on the Sonian blockchain or something like that, right? And you're able to do that. So that's not necessarily going to take away from these games' core economies, but it's going to potentially add value, and maybe games that support it will be able to use that as an onboarding tool. And then we start to see, you think about that with esports players having custom avatars that they can use in different places. There's challenges there, right? The games do a lot of work to keep things very optimized, and there's there's all sorts of challenges there. But with AI advancing and with kind of these creative tools increasing, I think that's the direction we're ultimately going to go. And I think that's where with UGC, we create these value pipelines that games can tap into and creators can tap into. And like I said before, expand the pot. Anyone else want to touch on any of those points, or I guess we can move on if I don't see anyone jump up. All right, Spencer, take us into the individual questions.
Beautiful. Sounds good. So the first individual question is going to go to Jun Young. So SuperBee is currently doing playtesting for its platform. What are some of the unique challenges or insights that come up when playtesting a Web3 game compared to a traditional Web2 game?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say the most significant challenge that we've been encountering is probably the onboarding process. I feel that many users are still quite unfamiliar with the Web3 ecosystem, and even the gamers that are Web3 curious are often kind of turned off by the idea of Web3, or if it's really in your face. So I guess for us, reducing friction in the onboarding process has been kind of a core focus. But regardless, I would say the onboarding process is one of the most challenging. And at SuperBee, in order to kind of reduce that friction, we're trying to build a fully cross-play platform where both Web 2 and Web 3 users can play together, interact on one unified server. And that's part of the reason why we've kind of integrated into SweetWallet's ZK logging feature, which makes all of that a bit easier for us. But yeah, this kind of approach for us puts the user experience first, kind of at the end of the day, enabling that smooth and natural transition into Web3, whether you're, just a traditional Web2 gamer or, someone who's been experienced in Web3 gaming. So ultimately, it helps us grow a broader and more inclusive player base, while trying to enrich the social and competitive dynamics as well. But kind of to go back to the main focus of your question, I do think that one of the big challenges that not just us but many Web3 gaming studios are facing is the kind of not just go to market, but I guess user acquisition, and trying to kind of broaden the target users, right? So because we want to be a kind of a game that's on the verge of Web 2 and Web 3. For us, of course, Web 3 users, they'll take notice. They'll probably be following actively some of the tweets that we put out and stuff. But I think kind of gaining the attention of the more traditional Web 2 users who aren't so familiar with Web 3 is going to be a fun challenge for us, and something we're definitely looking forward to taking on.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, it's funny because over the past 4 years, these challenges have kind of moved. And every time you try to tackle one, someone comes up with a really awesome solution, but it seems to create a new challenge as we continue to move forward. I think user acquisition is a big challenge, and I do think that the friction points are contributing to that. I also think that there's some pretty great account extraction tech at this point that can be used to remove a lot of those friction points, but then you start to sacrifice some of the value proposition that we're putting forth. And so, I think personally what we've tried to do is kind of separate the two experiences and have more traditional Web2 experiences that are somewhat bound to our Web3 experiences, and our Web3 enthusiasts can jump into one experience and have some enabled features, and our Web2 users can do other things, but maybe not tap into the full player economy, even though they can play the game. And I think part of that's just driven by some of the distributors' policies more than technological limitations. So I think if you're building high fidelity games, specifically PC games, there's this kind of distribution blocker that's making user acquisition very difficult. I do think that's going to change in the next year or two. I definitely don't think that right now is the time for high fidelity Web3 games. We're seeing even the biggest titles with the biggest marketing budgets struggle tremendously. I think right now we're seeing a ton of value for Web3 games being poured into casual games, mobile games, some of these games that are just easy to access because the features, those roadblocks can be abstracted away. But, when we look at Steam's policies banning Web3 games, when we look at the fact that Web3 games can't really currently be played on consoles with Web3 features, it becomes a bit of a challenge to acquire users. So totally agree. I think that time is going to heal some of these wounds just because, we need regulatory schemes that are more clear, at least, on what you can and can't do with Web3. But I also think that, it's these types of things are going to change with the tech getting better. So yeah, totally agree there.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Moving us on to our next individual question, which is going to go to Lost Glitches. So how do you see Web3 ownership and on-chain rewards changing the player experience and in-game economies for trading card games like the Lost Glitches?
Right. So I think we already touched a little bit on this earlier when I talked about the ownership aspects that, if players wish to, they can truly own their cards and trade them on chain, which, makes collecting and deck building feel much more meaningful and personal. And for us, I mean, it's the perfect match, really, we believe, for a TCG game to have tradable assets, because you actually get to trade your cards. I mean, if some of you played Magic the Gathering back in the day, I mean, there's, huge markets out there, secondary markets that you can go to in order to build your deck and acquire the cards, but it's just not that easy. What you usually do is you browse through a selection of a seller, and then you send the money and they will mail you the cards by post. So it's just amazing that in this digital age and with the Web3 technology, we get to be able to trade the cards at our own will without any limitation of location, because imagine you live on some island, on some remote island somewhere far off from the major trading markets for TCG cards, and then how are you gonna grow your collection, right? And so you can internationally trade at no time without any cost whatsoever. And that's just really a match made in heaven for TCG games like us, we believe. And when it comes to the in-game economies, we're still pretty much in the early stages, and I can't really speak too much about the in-game economies, but we believe that rewards should be tied to skill and creativity, and not just speculation. And so you end up getting a game that has rewarding core loops, and that just make sense in a tied up package that's for Web3 but also for Web2, because as our gracious host already told us, it's not easy for a game to launch on Steam. There are some caveats and there are some things that you have to fulfill, and so it's just a very, very, very interesting endeavor to be recognized, first of all, by Steam, and to be on the platform. And so this is how we more or less see Web3 ownership and on-chain rewards. And going forward, I'm sure we'll be able to share much more.
Yeah, you're hitting all of my love points. I grew up. I guess you mentioned Diablo before, and I grew up as a big Magic the Gathering player, and Pokemon. I still have base set Pokemon cards in boxes, and it's kind of sad actually. These have been in storage for years, like probably 40, 50 boxes worth of these cards that I used to collect, and I'm sure a lot of them have value, and there's some that I know have value. But it's sad because you participate in these projects, and so much of the game isn't just playing, right? It's collecting, and that collectability, the trading. My most fondest memories, I think, with Pokemon cards. Maybe Magic the Gathering I played a bit more, but I don't even know if I ever played a game of Pokemon. My fond memories were going to school, with the little kids, and trading them with each other, and seeing what I could get and what they had and what I had, and that was the fun I had with that. And so, like what you said with, a trading card game specifically, the ability to do that in marketplaces in more direct ways, right? I think just really amplifies what people love about trading card games. And then, the fact that digital assets don't deteriorate and don't take up storage space. I know my mom would have probably appreciated a lot if I was into collecting digital assets rather than rather than physical trading cards, which resulted in tons of trash and storages that we've kept now, probably 35 bins full of trading cards, in a storage unit for forever. And it's sad because I look at those and they're sticking together and they got dirty and all that. And, that's just a kid collecting cards and then, regretting it as an adult. But I think that, as the world becomes more digital, like we were saying before, that's not going to be an uncommon practice. So building out those pipelines is important. Spencer, I'm curious, you're very into this like collectibles world. What do you think on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think I have very much the same mindset as you. I mean, I had a very similar experience, and I had some Pokemon growing up, but Yu-Gi-Oh was more my thing when I was a kid, and yeah, like I think played a couple games here and there, but it was mostly the collecting experience, like going to school, trading cards. I remember it got to a point where like they actually banned the cards in schools because it became so excessive that we were trading these things, and they started seeing it as gambling and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, I'm excited for the future of digital collecting. I mean, I think it solves a lot of problems in the physical space, storage being one of them. And I think, gaming is one great aspect of it, but I think there's some other really cool things going on, with like RWA, like with, a couple different companies like Courtyard or Fanable that are, actually tokenizing physical collectibles, like graded collectibles, and putting them on chain. And, the NFTs basically serve as a COA for that physical asset. And then those get, basically stored in a Brinks vault. They're fully insured. So it kind of gets rid of like a lot of that friction when it comes to kind of the storage, and then also, the insurance part of it as well. So you have some of these, really valuable physical collectibles, and you never know what's going to happen. It's actually really a pain in the ass to get some of these things insured, and, you got to get things appraised and all that. And, I know people who, lost, really, really valuable and frankly, just like priceless items, in the fires in California that happened earlier this year. And, the insurance is great. You get the money back, but it doesn't actually replace the item. So, especially with something that's really sentimental, it's tough. So, I think there's a lot of things that are coming out, kind of right now that solve a lot of those problems and, still allow you to enjoy the items. You kind of get the digital version of the item in your pocket, and you still get to trade it, and you still get to display it and all that. And then anytime you can decide to pull it out of that Brinks vault and get that physical item if you want to. So yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of really cool things coming when it comes to, collectability and all that. But yeah, in the gaming side, that's kind of, similar, but a little bit different because those are, digitally native assets. But yeah, those are, I guess, some of my thoughts on that, just off the dome. But yeah, why don't we move it on to the next and final individual question, which is going to go to Roy. So what are the biggest advantages and challenges of letting communities coordinate and deploy capital in a decentralized way?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, just know that I'm gonna definitely answer this question through the lens of DAO's fun. just for your information. But yeah, I think the biggest advantage for us is like speed and alignment, right? Like we can, move very quickly, if you want to launch a meme coin hedge fund or a DAO. And we're also like, like the alignment thing is like we share the conviction of like meme coins and tokens being the future, right? And so speed and alignment are definitely like the two, I think, biggest. And then also just like we kind of want to just like kill VCs. To be honest, like VCs slow things down, they cause problems for people. And so not having, some giant VC with a bunch of money to answer to, I think is a major advantage as well. I think the challenge is kind of like, depend. I only started full time with Dallas Fun like 2 months ago, a month and a half ago. But like one of the challenges that they had before I joined was that like, they had a lot of freedom for DAO creators. And so, DAO creators could take the money out of the DAO wallet and, deploy it to different trading strategies with perps or like yield generating kind of DeFi stuff. But then we'd have people that would just take the money and run. People just rugged. And so that was a challenge that we had to address. I'll pin something up to the top because Bowski, the founder, wrote a pretty good thread on how we've kind of addressed that. And like now one of the challenges that we're trying to address is governance and making that fun, right? Because like DAOs in general just like have this weird stigma of like being inefficient and like kind of dumb and like lame, and I don't know, they're just, don't have like, you say meme coin and people are like, oh yeah, hell yeah. Even NFTs, hell yeah. But you say DAO, people are like, what? I don't care. And so trying to make that kind of fun and, exciting for users, because at the end of the day, we want our DAO managers to have a great experience, but we also want people that use the platform to have a great experience. And so, yeah, I think those are like kind of the biggest, or at least the most recent challenge that we're trying to address. And those challenges are kind of ever changing. And so, yeah, I hope that kind of answers the question. And definitely open to answering any more questions that you guys have about the platform, because I know that not everyone here is probably familiar with it. So.
Yeah, and it's interesting, and I totally agree. As someone who's kind of experienced DAOs in different places and seen where they can be very effective, and other places where governance ultimately does become very inefficient and causes issues. I think that it is important to, have that kind of built into the design when you're doing it. And I think that the point you made about the challenges is a very real one, especially with um, how much in its infancy this space still is, right? There is a real consumer protection worry with crypto, and it doesn't necessarily stem from the technology. It stems from what people can do with it, and this anonymity layer making it hard to hold people accountable. And we like to think that maybe that's just rug pullers and scammers and whatever. But I was looking at our Discord, and Mart's mentioned a very good point. You look at what happened with Artifact and Nike's acquisition, and then kind of a slow exit from the market once it didn't really become a profitability center for them. And you look at people who, even with the best intentions, got put in a really bad situation for essentially trusting a single point of failure, right? And so if there's not very clearly delineated, guidelines, and if investors don't know what the risks are, what the returns are going to be, kind of this whole process of, sure, we can break down all the KYC barriers we want, but we do need to make sure that people are living up to their word, that you can't just run away with the money, that and some of that can be prevented technologically. Some of it is an unfortunate reality, I think, of the space. But I think when we look at this and we say, all right, you've got major companies essentially finding that the accountability layer of crypto is so low that a major company can just fold a project where people were investing thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars into NFTs with no recourse, and be, I guess, naive enough to argue that those things were not investments, that they were just collectibles and people just wanted the asset because they liked it and they were willing to pay that for it. I think these companies and their lawyers know better, and I think that is what can happen with a major public-facing company. Imagine the issues with a single trader or some anon who's had some success on chain, but now you're trusting with tons of funds. I think this was the biggest issue when Pump.Fund, started getting big, and this whole meme coin boom that we've seen. Even a fair launch isn't a fair launch if insiders can acquire all of the supply. So it gets to a point where I think the industry has to grow a lot before these types of ecosystems really become viable. But I think that there's tremendous opportunity when they do. I think we need more regulation. I think we need clearer guidelines to how we can use crypto as a funding vehicle. I think we need clearer guidelines to how we can use crypto as a means of really driving value and incentivizing users and growth. And once we have that, we'll be able to really build interesting use cases of crypto. I think until then, we kind of get stuck with the crypto casino, which, if you're a gambler, I think it makes sense. And I think it makes a lot more sense to bet on the good gamblers than the bad gamblers. I don't gamble a whole lot, so I typically stay away from the crypto casino. But I do think we are going to start to get away from, just all this fragmented, anonymous, garbage that's coming out every day. And you have to sift through everything to find the good ones, to a more sustainable system where people can use tokens in meaningful ways to drive value. So I think it's awesome. Yeah, go ahead, Roy.
No, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off or anything, but I just, yeah, I think it's just an interesting, like, fine line, and something that is always interesting to me to discuss, because, like, I think a lot of people kind of forget this, day to day, but, like, the core, like, essence of cryptocurrency and, like, Bitcoin and all of this is, like, you are your own bank. No one's coming to save you, but no one's telling you can't move your money around, right? And so, like, when thinking about, like, rug protection and some of this stuff, it's kind of like an interesting balance, because it's like you want to keep everything quote unquote decentralized. You want people to have custody over their money. That's like the whole point. But with that comes like a level of responsibility for one's funds and money that they're not used to, and the system that most of us are used to didn't prepare us for, right? Because our money in the bank's insured, and if you make like a large transaction that you're not normally making, then oh well, shit, you got a 7-day wait from your bank. Thanks. Like, so yeah, I don't know. I just think it's a fun a fun thing to discuss, and like kind of an interesting balance that anybody building in the space has to think about, for sure,
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think that when I start to think about this, again, putting my lawyer cap on, I think that part of the problem in the early days is that the regulators just didn't understand crypto, and they didn't understand even what the value propositions were. So you had either no regulation or kind of these ridiculous enforcement actions going after the real innovators, and I feel like the plaintiffs bar, the lawyers who typically hop on to any consumer protection type arguments that can be made were absent. You didn't have these lawsuits keeping people honest. And so, my thing, I guess my challenge with crypto is the anonymity layer. I think that we're going to eventually see that get pulled back a little bit, realistically. I do think platforms eventually are going to need to require certain KYC from, user or people who are offering investment level products on their platforms. I think that's when ultimately we're going to drive better behavior, for better or for worse. I mean, I would love to imagine a world where no one's scamming and people are just acting altruistically, but I think until we get there, KYC regulation is probably going to only increase. But I think that what we're starting to see is a little bit of deregulation and more clear guidelines, and the consumer protection side ramp up. And so I kind of think, because I agree with you, I think one of the fundamental, like parts of crypto is you are your own bank, you custody your assets. But, if I have a really expensive watch and, I go to an advertisement of a watch repair shop that will repair that watch, and, I pay them a bunch of money to repair the watch, and the whole, thing is they're not even repairing the watch, they're swapping it out for a counterfeit, watch, and they're giving it back to me. And then they're selling that. If there's some sort of fraud going on, even though I own the watch, I custody the watch and all those things, we still need consumer protection laws to protect people from all the bad behavior that then results from that. I don't think it's going to work if crypto is just this like pathway into the Wild West. I think be your own bank, have your custody, comes with a whole regulatory schema that actually allows that to persist. And I think that that's the direction that hopefully we're going, and it feels like we're going. For better or for worse, we're starting to see at least regulators start to understand the potential value props of using the blockchain. And again, that's why I think we're going to have a major consolidation, because I think about 95% of the stuff out there probably doesn't have long-term defensible use cases. But the 5% that does, I think we're going to see real value start to come from that and really flourish. So yeah, I think we are running up at the end of the hour. So what we'll do, if anyone wants to jump in with any last words, that would be great. So what I'll say is, since we have the whole group, before we jump off, we'll do a little outro. But before we do, I know Spencer wants to announce the winner of our giveaway. So why don't we do that, and then we'll wrap up.
Yes, sir. So the winner this week of 5 Satoshi's crystals is I Am Diabolical, or at You're Diabolical. Congratulations. In order to claim your Satoshi's crystals, all you have to do is make a free account on game.legions2029.com. That's game.legions2029.com. And then just send us a DM and we will drop those into your account. I'm sorry, and in that DM include your username. But yeah, I'll pass it back to you, Nick.
Amazing. Well, congratulations. It's a really cool Twitter name. I love it. I guess, so for those of you, again, who joined today, thank you so much for joining. It was a pleasure to have this panel with all the guests. We do this every week, so please do jump back as we continue to host these. We'll post the date and time and the guests on this account and on the Hideout account. We do these panels, so if you enjoyed it, please do join us again. If there are projects you think would be a good fit for this, please send us a DM and let us know that you are interested. For those of you who don't know about the Satoshiverse, we've been building for a long time. It's all free. We're not charging anything to play our games that we've been building for, lots and lots of time right now. So check it out. All the information is in the pinned tweet. That goes for us, but it also goes for all the great guests that we've had on. Please check them out. Please follow the account. Please, show some support and learn more about these great projects that we've had on. I guess I will leave the mic open. I guess if you want it, let's do it in order. Why don't we do Super B, the Lost Glitches, and then DAO.fun. We'll close out, and then once you guys are done, I will close out the spaces. Thank you, guys.
All right. Like I said, thank you so much for having us. It was a great discussion, and some great questions were asked. I've shared a trailer for our Super Beat game in the top of the Hideout pinned post section. So if you guys want to check it out, please take a look. And yeah, I mean, I'd just like to say kind of reflecting off of everything we talked about. I guess at the end of the day, people don't adopt technologies, they adopt better experiences. So if we can kind of build towards that, it would be great. Thank you.
Thank you so much again for having us. I also dropped our launch trailer into the chat here. You guys can go check it out, and please visit our profile and find the link to our Steam page, and you can find our game on Steam. And add us to your library. We're free to play. We're a lot of fun. We're very easy to learn, hard to master, and super, super rewarding. And yeah, thank you so much for having us, and we look forward to coming to your space again.
Yeah, I echo that. Thank you so much for having me. It was a great discussion. Yeah, I also pinned something to the top, kind of explains what we've been up to recently. But if you have any questions about DAO's Fun or whatever, feel free to DM me. I will respond. And you can also join like the DAO's Fun Discord or Telegram. We're, trying to help out and, answer any questions that you may have, because it is a little bit different, it's a launch pad at the core, but, there's a lot of things that set us apart from something like Pump Fun, or Let's Bonk, or whatever has the attention these days. Boop. I don't know. So yeah, thanks everybody for joining. Much love.
All right. Thank you, everybody. We'll wrap it up now.